The mission and vision of the Chamber of Commerce is creating prosperity in a vibrant community, making our lake community a destination for work, home, and play. And because of that, the Chamber has chosen to back this lake project. We feel it's very important for economic development. And because we did that, we felt we needed to bring someone in unbiased that could speak to the issue on facts, what this can do for a community of our size, what kind of economic development we could maybe see in the future if this were to happen. So I want to introduce Steve Komanowitz. And Steve, if you wouldn't mind giving everyone a little bit of your bio.
Sure, I have it in the presentation here. I don't know if this is starting to show up here. Yeah, I'm here to speak about something called New Urbanism, and I spent 5 years at the city of Milwaukee, where we implemented a lot of these principles and helped to revitalize a lot of areas using these ideas. I was working with former Mayor John Norquist at the time. And then I spent another 6 years with the umbrella group that kind of helps support these principles and tools nationally, and they go into place in countless communities across the country. So I was there. My role has been in communication, so I helped to learn about these things, share the ideas among the members, help to really promote the Congress and get the message out. Basic idea is the idea of bringing choices back to communities. Up until about 15 years ago, almost every community was growing based on the pattern on the left. Places like this on the right were either illegal to create, they were often illegal zoning, based on the standard at the time. They could be threatened by incompatible infrastructure and plans and development. This is Brady Street in Milwaukee. If you look at the east end of this, you've got a Walgreens that's like a strip mall that really disrupted all this character. And if you look at the value that's returned here, you can see some of the streetscape elements and things that really emphasize the sense of place. Activity has really been around here, and something like that Walgreens is now seen as incompatible. But that's the kind of thing that 15 years ago, the momentum was still going in the other direction. Thanks to New Urbanism, environments like the one on the right are making a comeback, and now that they have a choice, communities everywhere are asking if they should include more places like this. Is that something you should encourage? Is that a good idea? And you can see that already some of these elements are showing up in the streetscaping plan and the other ideas in this community. And the whole idea, that's on the poster there, creating a destination, creating a vibrant place, these are the ideas that help to do it. And they've been shown again and again. It may not be right for everywhere in your community, but where you want to create a vibrant destination, these are the top ideas. So again, this is my experience just to kind of help. And I worked at CNU for 6 years, and I was commuting by Amtrak to Chicago. So that was as long as really my wife would put up with me doing that. So I recently relocated, and now I'm a member of the local CNU chapter.
Was that a photo of the third ward?
Yeah, that was the third ward, right. Where there's seen a lot of transformations.
It's beautiful.
If you want an indication of the value of New Urbanism as a strategy, this is Peter Park. I worked with him as a city planner in the city of Milwaukee. The mayor of Denver actually flew to Milwaukee and said, Peter, will you come be my planner? So that's very rare for a mayor of a big city to pick out a city planner and actually fly to him and say, hey, I want you to come to Denver and do what you're doing in Milwaukee. Thereafter, the mayors of San Francisco and Philadelphia also were trying to recruit Peter. And he's now at Harvard, where he's studying and kind of looking at spreading these ideas. Now it's just, I've mentioned Milwaukee, but it's not a strategy just for big cities. There's a model for walkable, livable neighborhoods that's right for every setting from the rural to the big city. So somewhere along in here, you may find something that's right for Muskego. Could you have more of the elements of a classic small-town American Main Street? If that's your community's choice, New Urbanism helps you plan for it, helps you pursue it. You can help to make it a reality. It may take some time. And when the economy was going a little stronger, some of these projects happened a little faster. But still, the principles are working. The values are, in many cases, very remaining. And again, you start putting a lot of the different pieces in place, and gradually start to see this vision emerge. Just ask Pewaukee, which came up before. New Urbanism helped it turn vacant lots in its downtown into a revitalized, walkable heart. Talk about restaurants, that's where they're going. There's a Mexican restaurant there, a piano bar, chocolate factory. Definitely a place where you can come, hang out, get a meal right in downtown Pewaukee. So whether you want places like this in Muskego, that's going to be your community's choice. New Urbanism just helps make it possible to plan and pursue that vision. The principles of New Urbanism are time-tested, but they're applied uniquely in each situation to suit the local taste. Great public spaces are really part of what makes New Urbanism so magnetic and valuable. But those public spaces take many shapes and sizes. You know, is the proposed park the right fit here? That's the community's choice. Again, it's a key part of it, but it's ultimately up to you as to if you want to go that route. It can be a catalyst as the ideas come up. So a little bit more about New Urbanism. You know, it's a planning development alternative. It's a movement that builds on and updates traditional community patterns. And so it says, hey, the traditional small towns and traditional downtowns had things going for them. How do we make those work today? Some of the quick principles, building blocks: connected street network, compact neighborhood form, residences are within convenient walking distance of shops, schools, parks, and other amenities. On-street parking is important. It's not all about parking lots. Walking and biking are useful ways to get around, in part because your distances are convenient. Now, you know, some people will live closer, other people will come to the neighborhood by cars, but it's really designed to work in a few different ways like that. High quality, human scaled streets and other public spaces. The attention you're putting into detail on the streets here makes sense because people are going to be walking on them. They're going to experience the land and stone. They're going to experience, you know, just the quality of what's being created, and that's what you see in the classic, you know, walkable neighborhoods. Contrast this with the conventional model. You know, here you have cul-de-sacs, kind of separating and slowing down traffic. They feed into bigger roads. When you have all that traffic feeding into big roads, you oftentimes have very big roads, such as Moreland Road. Those don't end up being good places to walk or bike. So, you know, this model in certain places is going to give you kind of this type of development. Homes are buffered from schools, workplace, and shops, so it's a farther distance, spread out form. You know, you walk or bike for recreation, but not for getting around. Here you see parking lots are a pretty major feature of every environment. Track record of New Urbanism. In 1980, some people said, hey, what if we could try to make a town like a small town? Walkable streets and blocks. What would happen? It was very difficult to make it happen. They had to battle with the streets department, the fire department to understand, hey, these narrow roads, can we get our fire trucks down there? They had to work out a lot of the details. But it got built, and it's now one of the most valuable, successful communities on the Florida Gulf Coast. Extremely walkable. You can, you know, walk in any street in that town and get somewhere within 5 minutes, get to the beach, get to coffee, restaurants, it's all right there. Seaside wasn't a one-hit wonder. Here's Ion outside of Charleston, South Carolina. Kentlands outside of Washington, D.C. You know, these may not apply exactly to you, but it can kind of show you what the ideas do when they're working. Mark Epley of Marquette University looked at Kentlands and compared it to comparable nearby subdivisions. In 1997, homes in Kentlands that were comparable to the homes in the nearby subdivisions were selling at 11% premium. People paid more money to be here because it was more convenient, had a better sense of place. It was attractive. In 2006, Kentland's premium had grown to 16%, and as the market dropped, the premium remained, as property prices did kind of decline in both places, but the premium remained in Kentlands. New Urbanism now has a full set of tools, zoning. This happens to be zoning and planning. They can help you, you know, shape development near places such as the proposed park and like the downtown of Pioneer Drive to kind of help support that pattern. Here's, you know, street designs created. CNU, the group I worked with the Institute of Transportation Engineers. They started seeing, hey, our style of building big roads with big wide turning lanes, that's not going to work everywhere. We're going to have to understand the language of the CNU, and that's what happened. And you see some of the ideas here, you know, with like corners, you can come up and see, are going to be nice places to walk across. They've got pavement, the nice spaces for walking. They don't have the big turning ramps that make for big, fast movements where pedestrians are going to be. As in Pewaukee, new urbanist approaches have helped to revitalize existing towns. This was formerly an abandoned supermarket in Montgomery, Alabama. Kind of show you some of the settings. This is turning public housing into areas on the right, mixed income, very valuable. Here you have public housing, people in Alexandria, Virginia, living next to near market rate housing, and people at this time were paying about $800,000 for those units. That's how nice the space was and the neighborhood was. Chris, you're now seeing plans to really take areas like this and turn them into areas like this. The formal plan adopted in Arlington, Virginia for that area is to turn it into this. And then you have examples like Bayshore Mall, and I apologize, this is actually a picture of Mayfair, but I couldn't find a picture of Bayshore. But that's an example of taking an auto-oriented mall, giving it more of a sense of place, bringing in these principles. You now have people living up here. You have shopping, restaurants, all there. Glendale put up $58 million in TIF financing. The developer added mixed-use housing, office, entertainment. So it was kind of a public-private partnership where some of this infrastructure work was handled by the city. The developer will pay that back through the taxes that have increased, and you'll see how big they've increased. The assessed value in 2002, and this was an operating mall, $73.7 million. Assessed value in 2010, $329.8, a much more vibrant place. A lot of people would say, oh, people will never shop in Wisconsin in a place like this, outdoors. You know, they want to be indoors, it's so much more comfortable. Well, that's not the case. People, you know, take advantage of the great weather. They make the best of the worst weather, but you know, being around other people, being in a setting like this can be very magnetic almost all year round. Why does New Urbanism add the value? In a variety of ways, New Urbanism delivers a human-scaled experience that really sets it apart from conventional development. This is where New Urbanism can really separate itself and where it can earn a premium. Streets and other public spaces are people-centered. Details of the environment, kind of mentioned this before, are appreciated up close at a walking pace. Automobiles are accommodated, but they don't dominate the environment. Public spaces draw people and bring value to properties that surround and support the space. This is Bayshore, so this is at the heart of Bayshore is a town square with this fountain. Kids play there, kind of thing that draws and really makes it a destination. Here's an example from Milwaukee. There was all private property along the Milwaukee River. People may remember this from back in the 80s. And, you know, there were chain link fences. This was all private. This was seen as a place not to be. You know, it was seen as a sewer or whatever. And then you can see on the right, the Riverwalk system created public space with easements so that the public could be here as if this were a sidewalk. And then that started increasing the values of the properties around. Here you see Rock Bottom Brewery and this whole stretch here, much more vibrant now that this public Riverwalk is there. The city's investment of $20 million has resulted in 3,000 new housing units and $600 million in added property value. And a lot of people would say, hey, you know, is public space good? You know, we maybe should have a gated community. That's the way to build values. But this kind of goes in the other direction. More public life, more people coming to check out other people, experience that kind of thing, can really add value. Here's Pewaukee. Pewaukee's new Main Street development takes really advantage of the beautiful beachfront park across the street. This is just this weekend. People were out at the beach, biking, and here are these businesses across the street. The Sidewalk Cafe was packed at this point, except this one was just starting up. The values have boomed here. The former laundromat valued at $350,000 in 2002, which was essentially like the land value. Now houses the piano bar and restaurant. The value there is $907,600. And the former vacant lot valued at $300,000 in 2002 is now valued at $1.99 million. And this is an example of people out there. So, you know, that's the kind of question of, could you go in this direction? Could you have a place where people in Muskego would meet near the water and you know, take advantage of that location? Oconomowoc is another place that has nice lake connections. And I said building value and livability. It wasn't really a big transformation that occurred here. It's just really taking advantage of its lakefront location. And again, people were out in droves. You saw them up and down walking, enjoying the nice day in their city with the access to the water. More people. I don't know if you would have been around Muskego, if you would have seen that over the weekend. But this is the kind of thing that helps make it happen. Here's Memorial Park, and you can see it has a nice connection to the street. This is Main Street. It goes down to the water, kind of like a harbor situation here. You know, nice memorial flag. Really sort of just a nice axis here that just kind of draws people back and forth. Good connection to the city. Here's a woman who's walking. It's right next to the downtown. I don't know if people have been there. This is the kind of business. This was a martini bar, restaurant people were out enjoying. That's right next to the park. This is about a couple 100 feet or 100 feet in the direction towards town. So this is, you know, from the park, you go right into this area. And here's another view, family enjoying the park. They actually have water on both sides, which is kind of nice. So that's really a quick example of what's worked elsewhere and why some of the principles are worth considering here.
Any questions for Steve?
Yeah.
In terms of years it takes for a transition like that to go on in a community, what kind of ideas would you forecast here?
It's hard to know. I think, yeah, you know, there might be some patience involved. When all the pieces kind of line up, I think Pewaukee was probably one example where, you know, there was an existing underused beach and there was vacant property right across the street. There it was pretty direct. You can see the transformation occurring quite quickly. With other places, you know, you might put some of these pieces in place, but it sounds like, you know, transformations can start occurring and the private sector often takes over. In the city of Milwaukee, you know, you would have looked at that river walk and thought, hey, no one wants to be near the Milwaukee River. But after that happened, private developers really started stepping in and funding it and wanting to get in on the action. So, you know, it's probably a matter of several years for sure, and could be, you know, a decade or something. But you're going to definitely see progress if you go in that direction.
Would you see the park as a catalyst for that?
It definitely can be. I think that if you look at what could be a catalyst in the town, you know, there aren't that many things that necessarily can be. You do need kind of a game changer. I do think that you know, making the connections between the park and, for instance, that Pioneer District where there's a historic downtown, it's not too far of a distance, but you want to have compatible things so that maybe the plans would call for extending that a little bit towards Janesville and you know, trying to see if there's developer interest in kind of extending that district. Again, it's close, but it's not like immediately right there. So I think there's just questions of what would surround the park. But again, it's quite an opportunity, and I think if you know, have an asset like the lake that close by, but you don't have any connection to it, your interest is going to really drop in terms of redeveloping that area.
You need to make a connection.
It really helps. Yeah.
My wife and I, we drive up to Pewaukee.
Yeah.
And we go to that piano bar.
Yeah.
Because it's a great restaurant.
Uh-huh.
And what's really nice about that area, it's got like a really good energy, and people that are walking around seem really happy.
Right.
And it would be good. No, it's people out shopping.
Yeah, right.
Walking. But it would be nice if the studio could kind of have that kind of atmosphere where people are just supporting the businesses and being kind of happy.
Yeah, you know, like this weekend was a weekend, you know, an unusual weekend in terms of weather, but it definitely felt like in these areas people were happy to be outside. They're happy to have something to do. They're happy to have a reason to be somewhere. You know, if you're just walking around an area that is more car-oriented, you know, you're not going to really love the weather or really feel like, hey, I'm where I belong. But if you're in a place that other people are hanging out in sidewalk cafes or, as you say, really just enjoying that destination.
Well, it seems like we're jamming on Janesville, people were coming out.
Yeah, well,
So
certainly, yeah, definitely.
provide the environment that will come out.
Right. Yeah.
I'm not sure how to work my follow-up question on this, but the driving force that got the vision going for this stuff in some of those places, can you describe what those driving forces were?
Well, you know,
Population or government or whatever?
What was that?
Population, government, or what? I mean, people's ideas?
Yeah, it really has to be both. Some places like that seaside that I talked about, you know, that was starting from a guy who owned the property and wanted to do something really unique, and he started kind of bringing in the architects who would understand it and had a vision for creating something all new. That's more rare. Oftentimes you really just, here's kind of a good one here. This was Woods, or think it's called Woodstock outside of Atlanta, but it was an older downtown, and it was really a combination of community development and the private sector, and people like the Chamber of Commerce coming together and expressing some support and getting behind these ideas. So it kind of takes all the partners together, but definitely I would say we always mention that the private sector has to be the one that ultimately delivers much of the project, so that's, you're really doing this to kind of set the table for the private sector. And I think what the mayor said was really true with what we saw in Milwaukee, which is, I used to hear my old boss say all the time, we need to make development easier. He said there used to be like dental surgery here, we need to streamline and just take out the red tape and think of the experience. And in Milwaukee, people, to build a project used to have to go to like 8 floors of different buildings to get different permits and the runaround. And they just streamlined that in one place in like a one-stop shop and said, okay, what do you need? Let's get it trying to happen. So that's really a culture change.
And you said that property values went up. You're talking about business properties in proximity of a development like that, or are you talking about residential properties, or both?
Well, a lot of these areas end up, like this one here in Alabama, they have housing actually above here. So they encourage some nearby housing. That makes sense. But, obviously other parts of your community are going to stay all residential or all commercial. That's, kind of the pattern that you've established. But, yeah, it really is both. It's, and I think it really are those projects that are within the zone of influence of that area. So.
Are those, like, the housing above there, is it rental, condos?
It can be range. I do know that, as the mayor was kind of saying, these days more rental housing is getting built. Certainly, this development, I could show you, actually has some single-family homes that are just built in a more compact kind of cottage fashion. And I've seen some of those proposed. People with smaller households may find those to be useful. So there are some, opportunities to create ownership housing too. Or, for years condos were selling well in these areas too. So.
And you also said that you need to have a community where you've got, some impetus from the government as well as the people. When you have a situation where there seems to be an inherent suspicion regarding any development, how do you overcome that? How do you?
Yeah, I think that, I've heard
that's what's going on here. So,
like there's something called the charrette process, which basically has people like me, but people with probably more planning experience that will help to have more meetings and show different images and visions. And I think that, as those plans, I think what the mayor was saying about how, people wanted to see the plan for the park. I think to the extent that you can have a charrette where you can say, hey, here's a vision for how some of the development could link up to the park, and this is what it might look like. It might look a little bit like Pewaukee. Here on this corner you might have this. And then, that actually helps the development community too. Say, oh, this is the vision for Muskego. I can see my, Bartolotta's restaurant going there or something. I mean, that certain type of business owners like this. It's kind of dropping on me, but that's the kind of setting that somebody like that likes. Whereas the Red Lobster tends to look for the condition. Right. They want a big parking lot. They want other big boxes around them, but that wouldn't work for Bartolotta's. So real quickly, that charrette process or a planning process that that invites the community in to see it and that they get to participate, and I think that you kind of need that people to start getting a feeling for it, to start saying, hey, that's something I can support. And I think the suspicion, you see that in a lot of places. So it's other people have been in the same place, and it just takes some kind of perseverance, and people can make a change. Might be interesting to see what the situation was like in Pewaukee, but again, there was probably a little easier because I think they already had the existing beach, so it just underneath. Yeah.
A question about the public perception of this. Maybe you just answer some of that is, you know, the public sometimes is suspicious of development, and wondering, are there different objections to this kind of development as opposed to what would be more traditional development?
Yeah, no, it's interesting, the word traditional, you know, in ways this is really traditional, like a Main Street, but if you say conventional, you know, like, I think that it kind of depends, you know, I think that for certain neighborhoods, I would say that it's oftentimes very, very popular in terms of what might, I think as you say, you know, people would wonder about the cost, but again, I think there can be tools really for that. TIF districts and things can be applied in these settings just as in other settings. You know, I think that sometimes just people getting used to the idea, like, will there be enough parking and those kinds of things. But as I say, there are still some parking lots. They tend to be smaller, not right in front of the buildings, and there's street parking, and you know, people get used to the idea. Yeah.
Is Muskego as a smaller population center equatable to some of your small city examples that you put up there, or not?
Like Pewaukee, you're saying, or
Well, anything you were referring to? You've got several out there from across the nation.
Yeah, you know, I think that you'd have to see the scale that would fit Muskego. How much business would you attract? You know, it would probably be incremental. You do have a pretty small historic downtown in the Pioneer District. So, you know, the ideas can work, but I think, you know, your point might be a little bit that you're looking to create a destination, you're looking for some kind of critical mass. Are people going to recognize that, hey, something's happening there? I do think that these areas here are fairly nearby, and the streetscaping helps to create a better sense of place. The question would be whether the businesses start to exhibit a little more of this kind of character in an area where some of their neighbors might have bigger parking lots and that kind of thing. In some areas, like I've seen Mequon, Wisconsin, for instance, you know, you get a McDonald's that has more of a traditional look. It's closer to the street. Maybe the parking lot's in back. They do some things to try to make it feel like a, you know, a better sense of place. So there's some kind of hybrid things that can happen in some areas like that. So yeah, I think, you know, hopefully I gave you some ideas to think about. There are, I think, you know, the Economic Development Department and resources that they can use, you know, planning experts we can, could also take it in the next step.
Thank you, Steve.
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming. I just want to remind you that tomorrow evening at City Hall, 7 in the evening, we're doing the public forum for Aldermanic candidates. Thank you. So I'd love to have you all there, or phone in a question, or hope to see you all there. Thank you all.